talking in general now about historic preservation in Arvada. Really, historic preservation, simply put, is using a historic building, accommodating for change. That could be a change in use, or it could be a change in living needs, while keeping the character of the building intact. And these are some examples, gosh, just within a mile of where we're at this evening, and you can tell that the character has been kept intact. Those are historic homes that have been adaptively reused for commercial purposes. There are a lot of misconceptions about historic preservation, and contrary to what you have heard in the past, historic preservation is not at all about halting development and growth, nor is it about forcing property owners to make improvements to their buildings. It also has nothing to do with requiring additions or other changes to historic buildings to be removed. And lastly, it does not dictate the color of paint that you can paint a building, because that's one that we hear over and over again. So why is historic preservation important? First of all, it creates a sense of place. What would Arvada be without the tower? It helps us understand what is unique about both our city and our neighborhoods. Historic preservation is important because it fosters stronger, more sustainable communities. And when you think about it, older communities are typically more pedestrian friendly, they're more kid friendly, they're more bicycle friendly. They provide cost-effective accommodations for small and local businesses to get a toehold and thrive. They help connect us with our neighbors, and they offer limitless and sometimes free or low-cost opportunities for us to explore and learn about our heritage.
Just to reiterate that a little bit, the pattern and design idea, look, this is not about real estate development. It's ultimately about building stronger communities. That's really the purpose of the whole project, is to build stronger, more sustainable communities and keep the character while allowing the change.
Thank you for adding that. Historic preservation is also important because it encourages a sense of memory. And our historic buildings and structures, when you think of it, are our tangible links to the past. And what if the only thing we had to connect us to this old 1800 schoolhouse was that plaque? How would that feel if we didn't have the building in our community? As I mentioned earlier, historic designation varies by community based on what is in the municipal code, what is in the ordinance. And so in Arvada, properties are designated at the national or the state of Colorado level. There isn't a local designation process in place. And so for Arvada, there are in fact 4 National Register historic districts and a handful of individually designated landmarks. And how many of you knew that you actually have a streetcar that's on the state register? I thought that was pretty cool.
Where is it?
Yeah,
I've got the address, I'll look it up in my notes for you. So I mentioned there are 4 National Register districts. 3 of them are very close to where we're at tonight, and the Arvada Downtown District is the one that you might be the most familiar with. It's also known as Old Town Arvada. And to its west is Reno Park, National Register District, and to its east is Stocky Walter. And do you say Stocky Walter or do you say Stockwalter?
What do you say?
You say Stocky? Stocky? I've heard it pronounced both ways, so I was just curious. And then that 4th historic district is Church's Ranch, which is due west of us. So for these districts that have been designated in Arvada, what was the process that was used to get them registered on the National Register of Historic Places? Well, it's a fairly rigorous process. There's an application that needs to be filled out, and it's not like filling something out on a cocktail napkin and slapping a couple pictures and sending it off to the state. The amount of research and writing that goes into one of these applications is just a tremendous initiative. And that said, anyone can nominate a property for the National Register. There are criteria that need to be met, and the criteria fall into 4 different categories, and you only need to meet one of the 4 categories of significance. And the first one has to do with history, and it's an event that contributes to the broad patterns of American history, so it's a historically significant event. The second category has to do with a person or persons. The third category has to do with design, construction, architecture, where it's of recognized importance. Maybe it was designed by a very famous architect, or it's an incredible example of an architectural style or a form of craftsmanship in its construction. And then fourthly, if it has or is likely to yield information important to prehistory or history. And you can think about this in looking at sites from an archaeological perspective. There's also this concept of integrity. So something has to be significant, and then it has to have integrity. Well, what does integrity mean? Well, it means that it hasn't been so altered that you can't recognize it as being of its time. So it has to maintain its physical integrity. And there's also what's known as a period of significance associated with something that is designated. And that's the time frame that tells the story of the property and its importance. There are some things that can't be designated. And those are typically things like gravesites, cemeteries, birthplaces, because a historical event did not occur there. It's the action associated with the person that's important, and where they were living at the time of that. There are also, if a structure has been moved, or if something is built to commemorate an event, historical person, whatever, because it's not the real deal, it's commemorative, that cannot be designated as well. And properties need to be 50 years old or older, or have achieved some level of tremendous significance. And there's a neighborhood in Inglewood, Colorado that some of you may be familiar with. It's called Arapahoe Acres, and Arapahoe Acres was the first post-war neighborhood in the United States that was listed on the National Register. And so it actually was listed before it was 50 years old, but that's an incredible rarity.
It was also on the cover of Life magazine in 1951.
Wow.
Alice, do you know if cemeteries can be nominated to the state registry though, can't they? Because the reason I ask is we have a young
Yes.
man in the audience who's working on a nomination form for the Ralston Cemetery in
Yeah,
West Arvada.
in fact, we are working on a cemetery project in Golden right now. And so there are differences at the national and state level, and you'll see those throughout the presentation. Most of what is designated in Arvada is at the National Register level, so that's why I decided to focus on that as opposed to the state criteria. They are slightly different. So let's talk about some benefits of designation. Some of these may be obvious and some might not be as obvious. First of all, one of the benefits is promoting our history. We're promoting both Arvada's history and what makes the city special. And it helps attract both residents and visitors to your community. And think about the 100-year anniversary of the water tower this weekend and how important that is in Arvada's history. Another benefit of designation is this concept of tax credits and grants. And I'll focus first on tax credits. Do any of you own commercial property? No? Okay, I'll touch briefly on the first tax credit, and this is probably the simplest one. It's a 10% federal income tax credit, and it applies for income producing properties. They must have been built before 1936, and it's for costs associated with restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation, and there's no cost at all associated with applying for this, and it's essentially a 10% discount on work that you would do on an income-producing commercial piece of property built before 1936. It is reviewed by the IRS, just like any other tax credit or deduction you would take, but a property doesn't need to be designated to qualify for this particular tax credit. It just needs to be older and income producing.